Hey guys, welcome back to Within the Cauldron. We're talking about the pagan perspectives on creation today. And with me, I have Miss Wendy up here, High Priestess, and I have Darthos down here as well. These
Mm.
are regulars in our community, and they're absolutely fantastic people.
Hi.
Good evening.
So I guess, oh God, where should we start? Creationism and paganism is such a huge and complex topic. Do we start with kind of pagan cosmology and kind of move forward from there?
Well, we could briefly talk about ancient beliefs in creationism. Um, you know, but the main focus, I think, is more of a modern view on
Mm,
what some modern pagans, believe. Things change over
thousands.
centuries and stuff.
Mm,
So I'm sure that we view things differently than our ancestors or, you know, the ancient peoples did. So,
oh
you
yeah.
know, it's it's more of a discussion of modern pagan views than ancient pagan views. But there are some. For example, the Greek kind of believed in what the world formed from chaos, and it was kind of a void, a formless void, and from chaos emerged the primordial deities, and from there, the gods, and it just kind of developed from there. And I'm not super familiar with Egyptian, but I believe they believed in like this primeval ocean that called, I think it was called Na, and it from there it was Ra was from there, and then it went on from there. So, and I know that the Norse, Nico, you could probably talk about the Norse. That try to condense it down to a couple sentences, but what their kind of beliefs in creationism was. Um,
Kind of similar to the Greek. So there is what's called the Gunya Gap, which is a gap in space, which sits next to it the realm of fire and the realm of ice. And there's this cosmic space cow named Amdula, and she spends a long period of time licking the ice realm and gives birth to Ymir, who is a giant, and his existence and sweat and blood brings birth to some of the early gods, which are Odin, Vili, and Ve, and they slay their creator and build the world with his corpse.
Fun. Nothing too complex there, right?
No. Oh, and we never hear about the cosmic space cow again.
Never
After
again,
the
huh?
initial creation myth, like, just never comes back into, like, the text.
It would be a good name for a band, the Cosmic Space Cow.
Mhm. Yes.
Hmm.
Yeah. Well, a lot of different belief systems believe in like an intelligent being who created the universe, or um, they believe in a consciousness that does, or there's various different thoughts out there. And I think if you asked any pagan, you're not going to get any same answer from any one, other pagan. So it's
Mhm.
it's a very individualized way of looking at things, and it can be very complex and it can be very simple. Um, it nothing is very simple for me ever. But who wants to start and talk a little bit about what they believe or how they believe the world cycle or the universe, what it is and how it was created, and if it has a purpose.
Ooh. I mean, I can start. So, for context, I'm a Norse pagan. So I subscribe to the beliefs in uh, the Norse pantheon, but not denying the existence of the others. Um, the there's an allegory to kind of what the sagas mention with this like empty void, and then from that stemming life. I kind of equate it to in modern science. We have the Big Bang Theory. It's most likely them trying to explain the Big Bang Theory. Uh, and for context, during the Iron Age periods, the Norse culture had a large influence in spiritual practices that stemmed from hallucinogenic substances. So some of their mythos are grander explanations and more fantastical explanations than other cultures may have. So, well, I believe that the universe was created through the Big Bang Theory. That still falls in line with my cosmology. And then from that, consciousness was created. Um, and that through this consciousness, the deities, who I view more as an external force than a direct force, um, being that they're embodiments of different human qualities and different supernatural qualities, and that they may not directly interfere with us so much as they are the purveyors of those qualities.
Very much in line with what I believe as well. Um, all right, Eric or Darthos,
My
let's
turn.
hear what. Yeah,
Okay, well, obviously in my youth I heard the Christian version, which I don't really ascribe too much anymore. Since then, throughout my studies, I really only came across the creation myth from the FERI fairy tradition that speaks about the great black goddess, whole and complete unto herself, alone in the inky blackness. And she gazed into that great black mirror, and out from that reflection emerged her divine counterpart, the holy God. And that it is through their immense sexual union and the constantly orgasmic nature of their union that not only did creation begin but continues to sustain itself to this very moment. Um, when it comes to me personally, I mean, I've studied a lot of the law of one material and listened to a lot of channelings, and a lot of that material seems to line up with the idea that, first of all, this is not the only universe. This is one of many, and that each of these universes has a creator being assigned to it from the great source of all things, but that the beginning of the universe is the expansion of the consciousness of this creator being, and that, like, what we would call the ether to this cosmic mind would be what we would call dreamland to a human mind. It's like you create a space for something to take place, and then you create what takes place. And it's sort of like a fractal of dreams scaled up to a cosmic mind level, to where every moment of everything is constantly being dreamed into being by an infinite mind, and it not only creates the circumstance of the dream but the point of awareness that goes through that dream.
Very interesting. Very interesting.
Yes, it is.
I've heard that theory before where it was the dark goddess, the dark void. And to an extent that makes a lot of sense to me. But I, on the other hand, coming from a family that has a mother who was in the physics field, have this like scientific thing, right? I have to have some kind of a scientific explanation along with, my spiritual explanation. So while I believe that the gods are ever present, I kind of believe that in like dark energy and dark matter and that sort of thing, a lot of the principles of physics, um, to me really make a lot of sense when it comes to energetic fields and, um, the whole thing being, the whole life thing being, um, that we are all of energy and energy never dies and energy just changes form. That whole theory has some basis in physics as well. So for me, I believe that the universe has a cycle. It has a beginning, it has an end, and then it has another beginning. And I believe it runs in cycles. And do I believe there are other universes? Absolutely, I do. It's impossible to think that this is the only universe that ever was, ever will be, and that sort of thing. But I do believe that the Big Bang was dark matter and dark energy coming together and creating that big bang. Now, dark matter is sort of like the building blocks of existence, okay? It's really not quantified in a sense that you could physically touch dark matter, but I think all life springs from that energy source. And so when they came together and they had that big explosion, you have to realize dark energy is what propels matter forward. So, bam, you have it propelled forward and going and pushing energy through the new created um, universe. And through that creation, you have the gods and consciousness. Well, you have consciousness, then the gods form from consciousness. And then all life forms from that. Um, Life on planets on a very small level, a very quantum level, to a very vast level, you have life. Because energy is life to me. I believe, that the stars and the moon, everything has an energy field. So everything has a life force to it. It's just perceived in different ways by beings who can actually perceive, who have the ability to perceive it. Um, that's why some witches can the moon can speak to those witches in a profound way, and they get energized by dancing underneath the moon in a way that maybe somebody that doesn't follow that path just couldn't possibly understand. Or, sun worshippers feel that energy. So I do believe the universe is cyclic, um, and I believe that there's purpose, and what that purpose is the unknowable purpose. We just it's not we have no ability to know what it is, but I do believe that, you know, we we through this lifetime and this energy field and energy force, um, feed the energy, um, by just existing in it, and we have a symbiotic relationship with the gods. um we feed them by our devotion, and they feed us by their connection to us, and not always giving us what we want, but their connection and their interactions with us. So it's kind of a really big and very complicated, um belief that I have. Anybody have a question for me about it? Because I know I don't know that I've explained it really well.
No, I agree with you. The only difference I can see for me is that I kind of view the Big Bang as it's the end of a wormhole, a black hole, sorry, and that the energy that comes in through the black hole, it's theorized that they are essentially a tunnel system. So once it pulls in enough material, it jettisons out somewhere else in the universe. Um, and kind of my theory is that with us having the black hole in the center of our galaxy, that at one point that was reversed and that it jettisoned out a bunch of material, and that was the result of the Big Bang. Same
Well,
concept. It's still dark matter.
essentially the same. It's dark matter, which is the building blocks of life and its energy, and then the dark energy propelled it out from. So, I mean, essentially it's the same thing.
Mhm.
Little, like you said, a little bit of a difference. And Eric, you have a bigger difference. Do you have a comment you want to make?
Well, yeah, certainly. It's not necessarily that I differ from your perspectives per se. It's just that your perspectives seem to be very physics focused, and my perspective includes that, but is not. I consider physical reality to be a very small sliver of all that is. And
Mhm.
so it's more like physicality echoes the rules of the greater universe rather than the other way around. Could you refocus me on your question?
Well, I just wanted to know that if you had something you wanted to add to that. And it's really interesting that you say that, because I think that for me, I can only know what I can focus and I can see. I don't know what the great unknowable is. And so my reality is based on, my perceptions of different things. And so I agree with you that there are other perceptions out there. Um, and we only
Right.
see a very tiny piece, but I can only be involved in what is knowable to me, what is, I'm not saying this very well, what I can work with in this plane of existence. So while I agree a lot with what you said, um, the abstract is difficult for me.
Right. I guess the point I'm trying to make is that you're kind of describing the physical mechanisms for the way this universe unfolded. Um, I agree with all that, with the underpinning that it was a consciousness that preceded and pre-planned and executed and embodied all of these things.
Okay, I can and see from my cosmology, it was kind of an accident. There was
Okay.
a pre-existing consciousness that was bound in ice and then was accidentally released.
Hmm.
That's the Norse cosmology you're talking
Hmm.
about, right?
Yep.
Right.
Hmm.
Right. And I mean, I haven't even really gotten into the gods yet. I mean, I just sort of got into, like we say, the cosmic origins of like the
Hmm.
orgasmic birth of this universe that continues every moment. That's, in scientific terms, we would call that the quantum foam, that
Hmm.
that vibration that consistently exists no matter how much we try to slow it down. Um, Goodness, went on a tangent and lost it.
Oh, it's all good.
It's very easy
Love
to
it
do.
when that happens.
But yeah, well,
Well, it's
and like I
okay.
said,
I
it's
did get it
different.
back. I'm sorry.
Okay, go
Um,
go go go.
but it's when you are an infinite mind and you're whole and complete unto yourself. How do you grow? How do you have experience? How do you do anything? How do you not bore yourself into non-existence? Theoretically, I'm just thinking with my human mind. But when the impetus to create occurs, that first expansion is going to be the most harmonious. It's going to be the most similar to the perfection and unity and totality that is the source. But there's only so much you can experience in that level of existence. And eventually through radiating out and just through exploring every potential possibility, and by interacting with the God, which is, I would say, the yang to the goddess's yin, if you will, to where if the goddess is perfect, complete wholeness, then the god must be total separation consciousness. And so this level of existence that we live on, there's a very interesting interplay between those two levels, those two consciousnesses that are both creative and
You lost your sound.
oh, you lost me?
There you go.
There
There
you go.
you go.
Oh goodness, how much did you miss?
Just a
Not a lot.
second or two.
Okay, goodness. Hey, I was pretty much done.
Right. Yeah. And again, I have some difference in the way that I look at it, but what about you, Nico?
The the there there's kind of the play, at least for my cosmology, of there's kind of three classes of entities found in the cosmology, and it kind of shows the play, not only like a transgression through time, but also that um, there's an ever-going war between uh, civilization, nature, and the force of chaos. So we have the Jotun, the gods of nature, which are the Vanir, and the gods of civilization, which are the Aesir. And the Aesir and the Vanir had a long-standing war, but this was after the Aesir had kind of quelled and defeated the Jotun, which are the gods of chaos. And Norse mythology doesn't directly have like an evil per se. There's betrayal, but there's not like a clear, like singular evil factor. Um, all of the cogs have a role to play. You can point your fingers where you please, but it kind of shows a progression of either the movement from animism with the god or the Jotuns being actual personifications of natural events and places in nature to a god in charge over nature to gods of physical actions and protections in a way. And not many pantheons maintained this linear path from animism through in their mythology.
Well, I guess my question to you is how can you modernize that as a viewpoint for as a modern pagan? How
What's
can you
modern
look
pagan?
at the cosmology of the Norse belief system in creation and bring it into more of a modern view?
I would say acknowledging the animism is understanding that, or I guess animism, to explain that, is the philosophy that everything has a energy or a consciousness, and that's still a widely held modern pagan view. We talk to crystals, work with trees, things like that. So that as a practice hasn't really changed. But as far as the deities and what they're in control of, I think that there's been a modern change in who we worship and how we worship within the pantheon. Um, from historical periods to modern times, who is worshipped in the pantheon and how it's changed. Freya went from a young goddess of handicrafts and witchcraft to a kind of dark goddess of love and sexuality and reclaiming femininity. And Freyr was the god of harvests and the sun, and is now a symbol of male sexuality and hard work and determination. And the gods have changed in our perspective to be, or we've modernized them in a way, as well as rituals have changed, partially due to cultural erasures, but also just, when's the last time you heard of somebody sacrificing 10 cows? You know what I mean? Like,
Well,
the last time you had a fertility ritual, you had to go slaughter 10 cows for?
no, we do it in a very different way now, but
Yes.
but what I guess what I'm asking you is when you described the the cosmology of the Norse belief in creation, is that your view personally right now that there was a cosmic cow that licked
That
licked
that
the world, or do you
so
have a
basically,
different way of explaining it?
so as far as, well, that is the origin myth of the universe. I attribute that to the ecstatic love of hallucinogenics that the Norse pagan tribes had. Women were known to drink what was called hensbane, which was a very potent uh, psychoactive, and they would sit there and meditate and go into these trance states, and they were known as satyr women or satyr consters, and they were the storytellers and the origins of the myths. So they would sit on this pedestal and they would speak and give out wisdom on various things. And my understanding of it is that most likely this was kind of the origin, is a woman telling a story off her rocker in the most respectful way possible. I'm not saying that the mythologies are bogus, but that they're grander in some places due to the use of substances. But at later points in different mythos, we see what's more in line with regular pagan liturgy. There's the sagas with morals, and really the Norse pantheon does a really good job of not othering the gods. The Norse gods have very human characteristics. They have flaws. Freya is known for her deep lust and greed. She cheated on her husband Od with four dwarves to get a magical necklace. Um, he left her, and she was cursed to wander the world, crying tears of amber for the betrayal of losing her husband. And
Right.
that is, the gods do wrong, and that they embody these qualities of greed. And as well in the Norse pantheon, the gods aren't omnipresent. They are only in one place at a time. So it kind of, the Norse pantheon, in a lot of ways, kind of deifies the gods, where these are people who through magical means live very long lives, but you take away the magic apples that extend their lives and they're immortal.
Right.
And they're just mortals with grandiose um, kind of sensibilities. Like they live these larger than normal lives, but it's very relatable.
Right, right. And I understand all of that, but there's a point I'm trying to get at here, and I don't think you're quite catching on. I'm wanting to know within that structure on a modern level, how do you think the universe actually came into being? What do you think it was? I mean, not explaining it solely through the Norse lens, but through
Mythology.
a combination of modern and possibly flavored with the Norse. What do you think? How do you think it began, or how do you think? What do you think its purpose is, or those types of things through your modern lens?
I think that it's the they have the similar cycle of life, death, and rebirth with Ragnarok. And I think that it was the end of one world and the beginning of another. Like on a fundamental level, that the creation of the universe was from the end of another. And we kind of have some scientific backing there. As far as the gods coming into existence, that plays into that cosmic consciousness to a level where um, similar principles that Ymir was the start of the cosmic consciousness, and from him separated into other beings, and then those beings eventually got bored with things going on, and they started dabbling and creating things, and animals and humans kind of come along, and then we evolve over time as they lose control of their creations, and then we get more power and more power, and that as time progresses, we get these stronger ideas, and that there's this weird, almost symbiotic relationship going back and forth, where the gods feed off of our devotion and our offerings and the retelling of their lores. And then in return, we hope for their favor, whether through bribery or blind devotion.
Basically, what I said,
Yeah.
but in a just a slightly different lens. I think with me, it's the world cycle begins, and then with each new world cycle is a new creative consciousness that
Mhm,
then in turn grows and becomes aware of itself, and then through that awareness it's sort of like the fairy
mhm,
tradition. It's like this dark void that grows and combines with the energy, and then from that it splits off and creates worlds and different forms of energy. Um, and through that energy continuously grows. I also believe in something that's called the web of life,
mhm,
which is an interconnection through energy that connects all life to all other life. And that it allows us to communicate through our prayers, through our dreams, through our wishes, through whatever terminology you want to use. But it's our conscious or unconscious or subconscious, I guess I should say, um, communication with goes through this what this web of life is, and it
mhm,
reaches out to other beings, the gods, all different things. It's a way we can connect with um extraterrestrial, we can connect with gods, we can connect with each other on this level of existence, and I do believe there are many many levels of existence that
mhm,
coincide with ours. And so it's through those different things that we can communicate and become a part of. I also believe in animism in the sense that I believe that everything has energy, so therefore everything has life behind it, even
mhm,
things that people may think are inanimate. And I've had that belief since I was a child. I used to talk to rocks, and I used to talk to um, trees and what now I know is fairies, but I didn't know they were fairies at the time. And I would talk to all these different beings, and I was like really conscious of their feelings. I couldn't have one rock by itself. I had to go bring another rock next to it so it
mhm,
wouldn't be lonely. It was just a really weird kid. But I felt like everything had a soul. to some extent. And I still to this day do believe that everything,
Mm,
it may be a different type of soul energy, but everything has a soul energy. And I think the more conscious you are as a being, um, the more connected to the vast soul energy that is the universe and is
mm,
life itself. Um, and so it coincides with a lot of different principles, just like I believe that time for us on this plane of existence is linear for the most part. But once we step out of this existence, it is no longer linear at all. It's like how you can go into a circle and you can cast circle and you can be in there and you can feel like, you've been in there only for a few minutes and you come out and it's been hours, or it's colder outside than it is inside the circle, or
mhm,
just different things. Um Energy does really interesting things, and the manipulation of it is fascinating, and I think it's all interconnected,
mhm.
every
I
bit
agree.
of it. Yeah.
Yes, indeed.
And the other thing is that I believe the gods then help us in so many ways, but we have like that relationship, that back and forth,
Mm,
but in not only just to the gods. And I think, being somebody that follows an Irish pantheon, and they're really, if anybody knows an Irish creation story, please let me know. But I have never been able to find, like, from ancient Ireland, an Irish creationism story. So, I don't know that there's actually one out there, but I kind of have a similar beliefs, especially in those warrior type peoples, um, warrior type gods, that they have a lot of similarities. And I think there's a lot to learn from all the different pantheons, but I think we are often drawn to a particular pantheon for a reason of, whether it be our ancestry or not. Sometimes gods just call to us because they want us for some reason. We have something that they need, or they have something that we need.
There actually looks like there is one that survived. It's the story of Dawn and Danu. Um, they emerged from a void, and their union created their children. Their
And I
son
wonder
Rhiannon killed
where the
Dawn.
source of that comes from.
That I'll have to look into that.
Because
Source.
sometimes there's people that put those out there with no,
Irish
it's
pagan
more made
school.
up. Oh, okay. Well, you
Interesting.
can't
Oh
get
yeah.
better than that.
So it's a parallel to kind of Germanic and Norse mythology where the being came into existence and then their child ended them and used their being to create the universe. Huh.
I'll have to look at that and see, because when I did my studies, I didn't see anything that actually talked about creationism. So I will look at that one.
Yeah, I'll send that to you because I'm interested too. I'll read more on that after. But that
Okay.
it seems interesting.
Do we have
Yeah,
I don't see anything, any questions out there? Anybody even, is there anybody out there?
Yeah, we have 5 people watching at the moment.
nice.
So we
Well,
have
and okay, go ahead.
Scott here. Rocks do have energy.
Oh yeah.
Very
Absolutely.
widely held pagan belief. Uh,
Oh yeah.
Even just from a folkloric standpoint, that we've used stones for protective charms and things for thousands of years.
Right. Right.
Yes, indeed. And
Absolutely.
where I was headed, anyways, if we don't have any more questions, um, is that yeah, I kind of have a rather different view on the gods than you all do. Um, I really think it comes down to one of two things. Either a culture in the past interacted with higher density consciousness beings, whether from another world or, just manifesting themselves, what have you, or it is our own higher selves playing the role we need it to play so that we can have any connection whatsoever, any meaningful communication whatsoever. And that if we're still thinking in, pardon me for using this term, but if we're still thinking in primitive terms, it's going to play a primitive role. If we're thinking in higher density consciousness terms, then that's how we're going to experience. And so, like, a lot of my experiences of what I know to be the gods and the goddesses, I think there's at least a degree of either my higher self was channeling those beings or my higher self was role playing those beings. But either way, a meaningful connection still happened as a result, so I don't really care what mask my higher self wears.
I agree. I have kind of a similar view where I'm not entirely certain if um, the gods are an internal or external force, and I don't. At the end of the day, it doesn't necessarily matter to me because it's not going to change my decisions or my practice as a whole. Um, I still believe that they exist. It just depends to what level they exist and how much influence they really have. But, even if we've shifted from a time of deities to a time of man, where we are now the agents of creation in society, that's ultimately still a part of the cycle of this spiritual circle, and that, when civilization collapses, inevitably the cycle will restart through animism, through folk deities, and come back around. We've seen it in so many cultures, and I don't think that it's a cycle that will end anytime soon.
Right. I think I agree with that. I think that it is infinite. Maybe this world's cycle will end and another one will begin. And
Mhm.
through each one, something will be learned, something will grow, something will be learned, something will change. There'll be change through it. And so that's why we continually do that. We continually have different world cycles
Mhm.
because I think change and growth is probably one of the most important things that we can do um, in our existence. And I think the universe is continually changing. And
Mhm.
as a reflection of the universe, we continually change as well. And the way that we look at life continually changes.
I have an interesting question. Do you believe that we are controlled through fate, through deity's will, or through our own will and our own choice?
Who wants to? You want to answer that, Eric?
Oh, okay. I think there's a degree of pre-incarnative soul contracts that can go on, and just sort of pre-incarnative choices, contractual or not. Um, there's things that we choose to experience, and sometimes those chosen experiences occur through non-obvious means, perhaps. Ways that make us question, and ways that make us seek the mystery in ways that we wouldn't have before. As So that, I think, it's as close as you would call fate.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, we're still conscious and we're still interacting with a
Mhm.
conscious universe at all times. And sometimes the consciousness of the universe is going to express itself in ways that we would identify as gods. And that's all good and meaningful and important too.
Good answer.
Yeah, I think I agree. It's almost like we have a destination, but we don't have a planned out route to that destination sometimes, and
Mm,
sometimes that destination can change because we took a different route. But we all have a sort of like a goal to become more, and because we have that goal to become more, that can take on so many different meanings to so many different people. Different cultures will see that um, in their cultural context, possibly. But spiritual beings do have, I think they have a destination, for lack of
mhm,
a better word. It's just not a clear path to that destination, and we have to and that's how we grow, is to find that path to that destination. And whether we make it this
mhm,
lifetime, who knows? But it is a goal. It is a destination that we need to get, or we're trying to get to. Let's just put it that way.
mm. Now, the reason I asked that is so from the Norse side of things, the thing that is almost above the gods is the Norns, the Fates.
The
Um,
fates, yeah.
they hold more power in that regard over everything versus the gods do. Even the gods fear them, but the gods still make choices, and we have an entire magic system called Cedar, which is built on warping and going against fate. Like its entire premise is to weave fate and warp fate. And it's a very, very interesting worldview and practice, is that we as mortals can amass enough power to challenge fate and to choose fate for others. Um, it's a very, very interesting practice, but I know that the Greeks have a similar view, and they also have the fates in their pantheon, but not every tradition has a concept of faith, and some it's assigned by the gods that push their will upon others, and that they have agendas for people and favor people. Um, that we kind of have both. Where like you can, we have a concept called Haminja, which is to be within God's or a God's favor, and that if you were within this homeostasis, that everything will go right in life. You have bribed everybody you needed to bribe, and that you will be blessed in return. Um, and then you can have the opposite, where you have angered somebody and they will punish you possibly in return, and that you may need to invoke satyr magic to pull against the gods.
Yes, I believe that I do believe in fate, but I do believe we have the ability to change
Mm,
fate.
I
I
agree.
believe that, we set this contract up. Oh, this is what I want to do. This is the lesson I need to learn, or, you know, whatever it is, however you term it. But that in turn, we can change fate. We can make it different than what we originally set out to do. And sometimes it's through choice, and sometimes it's not through choice.
Hmm.
Like you said, sometimes you piss somebody off and it sets you in a whole different path, or
Yep.
sometimes you are held in favor by someone and that sets you in a whole different path.
Hmm.
So, there is like a goal at the end, but whether we reach it, whether we don't, it depends on our choices in life and the
Hmm.
consequences of those choices.
Yep. There's a start point and end point, and I think that those are kind of laid out by the Norns. And you can go on as many side quests as you want, but you'll eventually get to this goal, or you will fight the current and forge your own path through our world and charter into an unknown, which is also beautiful.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I
Absolutely.
think it's sort of the concept of what are your goals when you begin a class versus
Mhm.
what are your goals halfway through when you've learned some stuff versus what are your goals at the end of the class when you know everything they have to teach you.
Yep.
And those are all three different things. And so you might have planned to go into this course to learn thing A and get result B, but then halfway through the course you realize that options C, D, E, and F are available.
Mhm.
And suddenly you're changing your speed. Maybe are you doing that because that's your actual path all along and that's just the way you found it?
Mhm.
That, not all of the stones of your path walk in a straight line? Hey, that's the way of the world sometimes, I guess.
Yeah.
There are things that are unknowable, and that's okay.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
Let's see.
Hmm.
Is there anybody that has any questions or maybe a different viewpoint out there that they would like to share, from our audience? I wonder.
I can see
I
you
don't
guys
expect them to
watching.
jump on there and type away, but it would be interesting to see.
Oh yeah.
Um, because essentially, aside from the collective consciousness being either formed before or after the universe is created, essentially we believe the same things.
Mhm.
There's a lot of it. I break mine down, and I don't want to get like too much into physics and quantum theory and string theory and all of those different things, which I think really can explain some of those theories could possibly explain how energy works and why
Mm.
magic works and why life works the way it does and why the
Agree.
universe is the way it is. Without going into all of that, I believe I'm not good with the mathematics, so I can't prove everything. I'm terrible with mathematics. The theories, however, have always fascinated me with physics, and so physics is a part of my pagan path in a sense that it helps me intellectualize what I believe, and it doesn't take away from what the ancients believed or the ancestors or any pantheon believed in creationism. It just gives it a modern twist to it.
Yep.
And so for me, it enhances my basic pagan beliefs.
Mm. And it's like we're modern pagans. Like we believe in medicine and the laws of physics and nature and, and kind of a general worldview that we don't necessarily have all of the answers from a scientific level, and that the hope that the more we understand things like metaphysics and the more experiments that people run, the more we'll find out, and the possibility that we're proven right or possibly wrong, and you know but at least for me, even if science came out and proved that that there's an energy exchange between people, but we can't find a consciousness behind it, I wouldn't regret where I've gone on my path. Like
Oh no.
it's been absolutely transformative, and that while I may seem like a skeptic as a pagan, that's kind of the point, is to question reality and nature and spirituality, because I'm human, and that
Right.
while I believe that you know magic and the gods are real, that is backing behind it,
Right.
and that we're all seeking for that answer that, what we believe is like real. But the difference for pagans versus Judeo-Christian religions is that we don't fight over who this consciousness is. We're just happy that it exists. And it's like whether, you call the Dark Mother the Morrigan or Hela or Freya or um, Hecate or whomever, that we're just happy that these paradigms exist.
Yeah, the beings themselves, because I believe they're individual beings, and there we go
Mhm.
with the poly versus mono
Yeah.
versus duo theism. But yeah, the other point I wanted to make real quick is that the other thing that we have to be conscious of and on our quest is that we can't lose ourselves so
Mm,
much into this universal thing that we forget where our feet are, so to
mhm,
speak. Our feet are on this planet, and this planet is just as important. This plane of existence is just as important as every other plane of existence. And so we also can't get caught up in losing ourselves completely to the universe, because this plane of existence is the
mm,
universe as well. So my I can't remember who told me this, but it was an old saying that um don't hold your head so high up in the clouds that you can't feel your feet on the ground.
mm.
So in other words, this is just as important, this being here on this earth and on this plane of existence, as all of the cosmic and the cosmos is. So
Mm.
that's an important thing to remember as well.
I had a similar one. Keep one foot planted on the ground and throw the other one in the air and see how fast you fall.
Absolutely.
Nice.
That gives me visuals. Thanks,
Mhm.
Nico. Thanks. Anything to say, Eric?
um, I mean, pretty much like you say. I mean, even though it seems like there's a huge difference in our perspectives, they really are heavily aligned. I definitely don't like having beliefs. I like having either a guess at the mystery or a fact. And, the information that physics provides us right now shows us what seems to be some facts. And
Mm.
so anything that I have belief wise about the universe has to align with what I know as fact. I'm definitely not one of those people that pretends that, my spiritual knowledge is more valid than than physics. That's not the way it goes.
Yeah, trust me, I totally believe if I had the powers of witchcraft from historical times, that uh, some of those stories of flying on broomsticks and the fantastical, this man has displeased me and I'm going to just drop him like a fly.
Wouldn't we all get ourselves
Oh,
in trouble, huh?
oh yes, like that'd be so great. But at the end of the day, like magic still has an impact on reality, and that we still have an ability to shape and change things within this world and the spirit world. But we have, we have this. Not everybody calls it the same thing. Um, I think I've quoted this before, but that prayer and magic and um, energy all exist, and nobody argues that their version exists. They just argue over what to call it.
I agree.
Yeah. I
I
mean,
agree.
that kind of I kind of, see the ether as an important aspect to this all.
Hmm.
and that vibrations of the ether are what make atoms work. They're what make crystals work. They're what make music work. It's what makes cymatics work. It what makes sacred geometry work. It's like all of the like sigils and runes, like all of these, geometries that are just, what is the relation between this vibration and that vibration,
Mhm.
and that so much magic is just that in different physical forms, but it's the same underlying principle.
The as above, so below principle.
Mhm. Yep.
That if you create something in your mind or you form it in a magical, energetic way, you bring it up to what I call the astral plane. It manifests in the astral plane and then comes down into this physical plane as a manifestation as well.
Mhm.
Um, and the key is not to hold on to it, but to let it go so that it is allowed to manifest. And all of that is interdimensional parts of the universe
Mhm.
and how it works.
Uh,
So
Thunder had a really good analogy that a man dreaming of a way to cross a ravine dreams of a bridge and then gathers enough people to create it. So he goes from the process of thought to manifestation to reality.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Yes,
And
indeed.
I think anything is possible within the universe. I think that energy can create anything. Um, I do believe in physics in the sense that I believe that what looks solid is not, and that if we could match the vibrational energy of what looks solid, we could actually pass our hand right through it.
Mhm.
I do believe in all of those things, which have scientific theory behind them. Now, there's a difference between scientific theory and scientific fact. So I want to point that out, that a
Mhm.
lot of physics is theory and not always provable fact.
Yep.
And that's okay.
Sure. But just like the Hindu folks, the gurus and the monks out that direction that have the siddhis, the magic gifts that you acquire through meditation. Um, that is absolutely real in my world, and I certainly believe that it is possible while still incarnated in a human body. We might have started out at what we call third density consciousness, but it is possible to elevate our consciousness to the
Mhm.
levels where the interconnectedness and subject to consciousness nature of reality becomes much more a palpable aspect of your world.
Mhm.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I'm not saying that because it's theory and it hasn't been proven that I don't believe in it, or you know what I mean?
Yes. Yeah, I'm not
Just
I'm not
maybe I'm
like
saying,
challenging your beliefs on that. I guess I'm just adding,
Mhm.
there's been examples throughout the world of, focused meditative practice that leads to amazing wonderful powers.
Oh yeah, and
And
there was a
and
really good
that
study
yeah, go ahead.
that worked on. They were studying people with devout religious beliefs and like extreme meditative practices like deep prayer, and studying the uh, movement of the brain where they have like 40% more activity within their frontal lobe than people that don't hold those practices. And they looked at Mormons who sit in deep meditation, um, Tibetan Buddhists, I believe some pagans too that do meditative practices, and the patterns were all very similar across the board as far as it didn't matter what denomination or whatnot somebody was, but the sincerely held like deeply religious belief led to more um, religious experiences, and that there's some correlation with increased activity in that frontal lobe that puts certain people into more religious experiences and more profound states of consciousness.
Yes, indeed. Your focus
Yes.
determines your reality.
Mhm.
Yes. Absolutely. I agree. It's just incredible what you can do if you continue to do the work. Belief is a very powerful thing.
Mhm.
It helps you to focus. And so it also helps you to create what you perceive as reality too.
Mhm. And that can go very far. There was a study that they did kind of phrasing the placebo effect on death. So they took a population of totally healthy people and people that were terminal, and they gave them fictional end dates. The or I think all but one person from the study passed away within 2 weeks of the date, and the one gentleman that made it past his date passed the week after. And that the totally healthy people with no pre-existing medical conditions under enough belief willed themselves to death. Now the study is unethical in my opinion to just do the result of the the unwarranted death of people and my view of holding life sacred. But it's a very fascinating concept of the power of the human will.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Completely agree.
Yep. I, I,
Completely.
I think that that consciousness connection that
Hmm.
is a direct link to the source of all things gives us all the worthiness, all the power, all the right we need
Hmm.
to do as we will.
Hmm. It's a good
Right.
lesson. Kind of like the spirit having a spiritual backbone, and that I think that it's an important thing to have in your practice is to have kind of necessarily like rigid beliefs or rigid structure and that self-awareness and self-confidence, and that those will carry somebody into practice very, very far.
One thing we didn't touch upon is an afterlife and how
Mm.
that works through this universal belief in creationism. Well, what happens to our consciousness when we leave this plane of existence? Are we joined with other beings? Are we in a place? Do we just become part of the energy source that is life? Um, do we believe in reincarnation? As some believe in reincarnation as energy that could come back as whatever form of life. Some believe that reincarnation can come back as only the energetic source that you are a part of. So, in other words, humans can only come back as humans or that type of being,
Ooh.
or they can come back as a different form of being. um how do you see the afterlife with the belief that you have in how the world cycle was formed? Anyone?
Um, well, I think that again goes to my perspective that the physical world is such a small sliver of the totality. I have the belief that because our source is infinite, that our souls have infinite lifespan and the infinite ability to grow and learn until we too are gods in our own right. And so the afterlife is just sort of, from what I understand, again, law of one is sort of informing me on this one, that our higher self is floating along through the ether, incarnating aspects of itself in different lifetimes as it goes to gain the experience that it wants. And that, there could be whole families or whole groups of people on the earth that are all aspects of that one higher self having experiences. And just as well, those fragments could be separated by centuries and thousands of miles, and yet we all eventually return to our higher self with the experience that we came to have. And as we exit this life, this little aspect that our ego and our illusion of separation gives us, that returns back to that oneness of our own whole self. And then that oneness that is us decides where we go from there. And we might decide to reincarnate. We might decide to spend an incarnation as a crystal, just to know what first density consciousness is like for a while, and just to know that the only thing you know is what you are, and that's it. And then you might spend some time as an animal and learn that, you know, how to interact on a species level consciousness instead of just a beingness. And then you might decide it's time to be an archangel for a while and learn, you know, after having gone through all that, how do you then experience life that close to source? I mean, it's all of possible experience is available, I think, on an
You
patient
disappeared.
is.
There you go. You're back.
Whoop, there we go.
Oh no. We have Eric is well, paganism is all about the afterlife. You're not wrong. Um, it depending on the cosmology, the afterlife is kind of the final goal, whether to reach the next incarnation or um, the nirvana. There's so many concepts of where we go when we pass, but the the some pagan cultures believe that the life that we live here is more important than where we go after. In others, it's vice versa. It just depends on the cultural context and the individual's UPG and their traditions. Um,
That old saying is you ask one pagan and you'll get a different answer from every pagan that you ask.
Mhm.
No two pagans are going to give you the same
Yeah,
viewpoint or answer on that.
Yeah,
because the afterlife in Germanic paganism is kind of complex. There's not just one afterlife. It varies on how did you pass, what was your character, um, and that's before you get into the concepts of the soul within Germanic paganism, which the soul isn't a single part in Germanic paganism, and the sources vary between 2 to 7 or 9 parts to the soul. You have the Filga, which is a animal that takes human form that guides you through your life, and that this is um, in historic witchcraft. You can view this as like the fetch or the familiar. This is a spirit that you can use in witchcraft to aid you in astral projection and things like that, but it's typically only ever seen when you come close to death. To see the figure is to expect death to come to you. And then you have the ancestral pull, the masculine and feminine, which kind of goes back to the deification of ancestors, and that there's a conscious pool of these spirits, and that um, one of these soul parts is a piece of this ancestral pool that reincarnates through family lines, so that um, and it gets really complex because then a part of your soul goes to one of the like 9 afterlives that we have, depending on how you die. If you die of old age or disease, you may go to Helheim. If you fought significant battles, you may be taken by the Valkyries to Odin or Freya's hall, either Valhalla or Folksvanger. But Valhalla has 108 doors, and that's through the entirety of history. Only 108 of the best warriors go to Valhalla. The larger number may go to Folksvanger, which is Freya's hall. And then you have Rand's hall, which are those that or drown or die at sea, and Niflheim, which is the mists of forgetfulness, which may also be another allegory for how modern pagans have, where the well of forgetfulness, and then you reincarnate. Um,
Right.
and these are just a few of them. There's the Baldur's Hall for those who live a large life of scholarly behavior. They may find a final resting place in their grand library. But this is a part of you that goes on to experience this. Another part of you comes back in a physical consciousness. Another part returns to the earth and the land spirits, and you may become a land spirit, or you may, through something in life, be forced to walk the earth as an unrestful dead. And that's another thing. So, like, our
Oh,
viewpoint
yeah.
can become very, very complicated on, and these are all parts that can be you at the same time. You can be a white, a land spirit, a physical incarnation of an ancestor, and an ascended master, essentially, all at the same time.
Absolutely. And then, I had a spiritual partner. He's no longer of this plane right now, at least not that I'm aware of anymore. Um, but his take was that you had soul families, and that
Mhm,
doesn't necessarily mean ancestors, but souls that kind of traveled in groups
mhm,
that always connected somehow when they returned. And then we also kind of taught a belief system that there, like you said, there are many parts of your soul, um, and that you have part of your soul that is immortal. It's connected to the great consciousness. It's connected to what some people call the all, or it's connected to just what life is. And then that you have a part that is connected to the plane of existence that you're on, the reality that you're in, your conscious mind is in at this time. And then through your dreams and through meditation, you can connect back and forth with your consciousness that is immortal, and you can relay information, um, lessons that you've learned, and all of those things. And that, in a sense, the physicality of your body is what dies, but the rest of you does not. Do we
mhm,
go to another place? Is there a Summerland? Is there a resting area before? I think it's all what your belief is, what you create your reality to be
mhm,
when you leave this existence, on this plane of existence. You create whatever your afterlife is going to be, and that's kind of your holding pattern until perhaps you are reincarnated.
mhm,
You come back as I I tend to believe that our energy kind of comes back as the same type of energy.
mhm,
I don't really necessarily believe that I would come back as a crystal. Nothing, I'm not saying anything wrong with that belief, but I just think our energy frequencies are a little bit too much,
mhm,
um, to do that, and that's more of a energy that is found within this plane of existence, and that, sort of like some, let's say brother spider or sister spider leaves and comes back, but I believe that sister spider comes back as an animal in that sense, and that humans come back through our conscious way of looking at life, and our beingness come back
mhm.
as another type of being like we are. It's just, that's my way of looking at it. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, or it's just my held belief.
Yep.
Yeah, I think my personal perspective of the illusionary nature of time means that we're not necessarily bound to a direct linear progression on a soul level, that we can
Mhm.
bounce back and forth to any time, any level of consciousness to whatever we need to experience, and we're still growing even if the linear path that we might take through those experiences might not make sense.
Oh yeah.
Right. Oh, yeah, we could be living, I could be here right now talking to you and be my 3-year-old self and then be my, 20-year-old self and all of that at one time,
Hmm.
Time is not linear. We only perceive it as linear. I
Yep.
agree with that 100%.
Hi, Cat. I agree. Where I'm torn between the two concepts of are we or on a spiritual level is time running in a linear fashion, or is time being experienced in a cyclical fashion, and that all expressions of time are happening simultaneously? It's just the shift of your perspective in different points, but that our brains won't allow us to perceive that information in its entirety, so that we are, until that life ends, you don't view the rest. You may be able to
Right.
get peeks into it, but I bounce between the idea of either we can access this like consciousness within our soul, or like overarching divinity, and view back into it like past life regression, or that you can peek into alternative universes of yourself that exist simultaneously. But we don't have enough evidence for me to really choose a side on which way I think. But that.
Could be both.
Hmm.
Could very
Yeah,
well be
really.
both. It's, yeah, there's so many infinite possibilities, and that's what makes everyone's perspective so not only unique but interesting and kind of beautiful,
Hmm.
in some senses. It's really a beautiful paganism is a very beautiful path
Hmm.
in that it allows for individuality, and it allows for people to have other perspectives. I mean, we get passionate and we can argue and fight
Hmm.
about it. Oh, yes, we can. But in the long term, in the bigger expanse of things, we're really more accepting of different belief concepts than
Yes.
a lot of other people are.
I think on some level we're all somewhat aware that we're blind people trying to describe the elephant.
Hmm.
And that we
Right.
can accept that your experience of the trunk and your experience of the tail are just as valid as my experience of the leg.
Hmm. Yes. Um,
Absolutely.
the allegory that somebody gave me that I absolutely love is that it the if you put divinity or had to put divinity into a room, that there's this large long table and it's filled with lamps, and that some pagans will focus on the lamp, some on the light bulb, some will focus on the table, and some will stare around at the entire room around them. But none of us deny the existence of anything within the room or the room itself. We just focus on a different aspect.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
that actually really makes this a beautiful path.
Hmm.
And we're still each approaching it from our human perspectives that can
Yeah.
only perceive so much of the mystery at a time.
Hmm.
Any other questions from the crowd, so to speak?
It's a lot. It's a really complex topic.
It is. And I know we're approaching what,
About an hour and a half.
time-wise. Yeah, so maybe we should end it at in about what, 6 more minutes or so. That's
Mhm,
why I was like, are there any other questions from the audience or um remarks or anything
mhm,
that somebody might want to talk about really quickly before
mhm.
we
If anybody's just chiming in, we've been discussing creationism and um, how historical views make sense in modernity, and the concepts of the soul and divinity, and how, as modern practitioners, we have views on the scientific methods and still maintain spirituality.
absolutely. Absolutely.
And
And
this is the tip
I
of the
tell you what,
iceberg.
I could talk about this like for more hours and
Oh, yeah.
but
And we will
and
be
talk about
doing.
different concepts that I hold and that sort of thing. Having been on my path for a very, very long time, and sometimes I kind of mumble how long it actually is because I'm getting up there a little bit, getting up there.
Oh, yeah.
Um, but it just makes me, you become inquisitive when you're very young, and everything is why or what or how, and then you get a little older and it's, oh, who cares about why, I'm just going to do. And
Mhm,
then you're doing and doing and doing, and then you get older and it's like, well, why and how. And you
mhm.
come right back to that inquisitive mind of yourself, trying to explain why and the hows of the reality of your life. And it is really kind of a going around the circle cycle.
Mhm,
I think life and experience and the universe and everything has a cyclic pattern. I really do. And
mhm.
I see these patterns in almost everything around me, in life itself. So it's just
Oh, yeah.
fascinating to see that in creation, and see that in life, and see that in death. And you know, it's just kind of the way it is. And so here we are
Mhm.
again, searching, saying why and how, you know,
Oh, yeah.
and when and where, and all of those questions that we have as when we were
Mm.
young and now when we get older.
Mhm. Especially if you get into comparative religion, even just from the pagan perspective, the level of archetypes and the why certain deities fall under certain archetypes gets really, really intriguing. Like gods of thunder being leadership gods in most pantheons. Shango, Thor, Zeus, and you know they all hold a similar role, but they're from vastly different time periods and different cultures. But how did we come up with the lightning wielding leader god, or the dark mother of witchcraft or secrets, and we're the gods
Mysteries.
of love and the mysteries and
Yeah, I think that's what brings us back to the conversation we were having, that like, the archetypes of the current world are the lessons of previous worlds,
yep.
Right,
like
right.
put into practice and actually
Mhm.
carried to the next level.
And we're still fighting for the answers.
We're still
Yeah,
searching.
but we're learning by doing, which is,
Yeah.
yeah. The only way
Very
you learn is
important.
by interacting with the unknown.
Mhm.
And sharing with each other as well.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I think with us doing the podcasts and doing the discussions on Discord, from our Facebook group within the Cauldron, that we did done those for the last 2 years. I've learned more and questioned more about witchcraft and different practices in the last 3 years than I have in my 20 years of practicing witchcraft. And it's thanks to you guys and the members in our communities and the people that come and watch these discussions that, you pick our brains and we pick yours, and that we get people with these beautiful, imaginative brains and like intriguing UPG, and it's just fascinating. And then you get the people that are absolutely unhinged and somehow broke like what we might consider like basic laws of witchcraft, and I'm just staring at them in shock of why does this work and how the hell did you figure this out? I've met a
Yeah.
couple there that I'm sitting there watching like them do this work, and I'm like, you're like breaking all of the foundational like or all my foundational understandings of witchcraft, but you're getting results. But how the Sam hell did your brain decide that like this was a thing you could break?
Yeah, I think some of my conversations with Wendy have gone that way too, where like some of my studies in chaos magic, where I suggest that any energy is accessible at any time through a connection in consciousness. You don't have to wait for the ideal conditions. You can reach out through your mind to a time and place where it's perfect for what you're trying to do
Mhm.
and draw that energy into your present moment.
I
And
have a similar one where, as a folk practitioner, we don't often deal with planetary alignments or planetary hours. It might matter if the moon's full or not, depending on the folklore, the spell you're going for, but it doesn't really matter anything else. With enough oomph, willpower, and seasoning, I'll do it.
There's always a workaround. There's always a workaround. But my point was, why swim against the current when you can flow with it?
Mhm.
It just makes life easier just to kind of use that current to propel yourself instead of trying to flow against it to create what
Oh
you
yeah,
need. So I just
I do a similar method. I'll boost my spell with ingredients and correspondences for what my goal's aligning with. And I may go overboard a little bit with some of that, but it gets the job done. Just don't ask how much coffee was used in the process. That's between me and my cardiologist. And we have Chrissy here. Good note. So within the cauldron, we do have our Facebook group that's also within the cauldron, and a Discord that's linked within there. Um, if you're watching this from YouTube, we have a link on our page that'll take you to the Facebook, and then there's a link in there that'll take you to Discord. Um, and we are soon launching witchcraft lessons from our traditions, as well as spell kits, custom spell work, and more. Um, as well as if you join our Facebook group, we have a whole host of files on various subjects from witchcraft to um, breath work, energy work, different gods, goddesses, herbalism, you name it. If we don't personally practice it, we have somebody in the group that does. And if we don't do it ourselves, we know somebody that does.
absolutely. Well, it has been a absolute pleasure to have this discussion this evening. I
Mhm.
was so looking forward to it, and I really
yeah, same.
appreciate everybody's viewpoint, and I appreciate you, Nico, and you, Eric, and Chrissy, and Chris, and all the administrators of within the cauldron for allowing me to come in and bring this discussion into this forum. Thank you guys so much.
Mhm. And we have a part two coming too on the isms of witchcraft, the dualism, monotheisms, polytheisms, and their
Yep.
differences. which will be super
Yes.
fun as well.
I agree. I'm looking forward to it.
And then I
Right.
believe coming up, our next podcasts of note are the 7th and 8th of May. The 7th of May, we have M. Ballinger coming on, the author of The Psychic Vampire Codex, renowned paranormal investigator, psychic medium, and energy vampire. And then the
Ooh,
8th, we have Elith, um, who is a psychic medium and witch who will be talking about soul contracts and twin flames, which will be very interesting as well.
absolutely.
And I
Look
think
forward to
we
it.
can wrap up here. Thank you guys for coming on. Thank you guys for watching. Blessings. Comment, like, subscribe, find our Facebook page, and until next time, stay blessed.
Great Goddess, I am so thankful to have you guiding me, protecting me. I am so thankful to have you guiding me, protecting me. I am Great Goddess, I am so thankful to have